But there's so much complexities around color. We are talking about the properties of color, color relationship, and bringing everything together. And if you have been painting with color just by choosing colors that you like, well, that is really the first step. Today, we will be doing a second layer of our painting, and one of the things that I want to talk you through is how exactly we are thinking about areas in our painting that we want to change or improve. You are going to be learning words like glazing and seeing the possibility of color mixing on the paper. This was actually a live session that was done on Instagram, but like I said, you being on YouTube means that you are one of those serious ones, so grab your brushes and your paints and let's get this lesson going. Now, color values is the second part of our painting. And when you have reviewed your painting, one of the things you want to see is which areas in your painting has got light, mid, and dark tones. And you need to have a variation of all of these different tones. Now, every time you feel like your painting looks overworked, one of the things that happens is that it dries in this way and it looks very washed out. So everything looks very washed out. But rather, if you look at it in this side, where it is more of its mid-tones and dark tones, you can actually see that what your painting needs is a whole variety of different tones. So let's take a look at this and basically troubleshoot it. Then we're going to play around with color a little bit. Now what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be spraying down my paints, and you know what else I'm going to be doing? I'm going to be spraying this down. The paper is completely dry right now, and I'm just going to be spraying it down. And what happens is that you get, well, wet paper. I'm using a 100% cotton sketchbook. So I would highly recommend that you swap out your paper if you're still not using 100% cotton, because then it is going to be really frustrating when your effects don't go the way you want it to. So let me now look into increasing or changing up the color where I feel like it is a little bit washed out. And here is where there are certain things that are happening here that maybe I want to darken. And I'm going to dip my brush into my paint. And what I do typically when I brighten or change the color, so what we're doing is troubleshooting it, is that I like to make sure that the color I'm choosing in my palette is a color that is around the color wheel. It is analogous. So that way it makes it a lot easier. It doesn't also feel like there is too much, variation. That way you're also going to feel like the painting is not overworked when it looks very muddy. So inject in a little bit of fun. So I'm adding in a pink now, a rose here. And here is purple. And I'm noticing that it's drying up. So I'm just going to spray it down a little. And the reason why I'm spraying it is because I want the petals and the effects to be soft. See, what I'm working on is I'm essentially glazing over some parts of this painting. And I know that's the scary part, working on the second layer. And this is also the part that, because it's scary, many of us end up overworking it. So now what you've seen is I actually glazed over pink here. I've added in a little bit of orange, and you can see that the color is kind of moving in. And the whole point of this is I am trying to showcase to you how we can essentially bridge colors together here. When I added this orange here, it was bridging the color from here over to the purple, and you can see it goes over to the blue. On the flip side, choosing orange here is also because it is complementary to blue. So you can see all of this application just taking place and happening. And with that complementary color, you are also going to get a lot more contrast, and that's going to inject in a bit more fun into this painting. Okay, now let me just work a little bit on glazing some parts here. And what you can see is that I just changed the color value. Again, Just like the first part of the video, I talked about using your brush to do the work for you, so you manipulate it. I can see that over here, they're both very light. So I want to change up the color value here also. And you can see just by doing that, adding a contrast in value where there is dark and there is light here, straight away the painting feels a lot more popping. So you can see I'm moving around my eye throughout the painting. Here is all probably slightly damp or dry. I'm adding in a little bit of a darker value of yellow. And it is going to blend just because it's wet. And that's the effect that I want, okay? And I'm going to add in that same yellow here, right? And maybe here as well. So what I've created is that all of these flowers have yellow centers. Now, one of the things that I like is actually adding in a little bit of green to my yellow centers. And I always find that the green creates some harmony, and it's also great because you're going to introduce green in your painting. And I'm going to just do it here as well. And you can see, now this here, when I am adjusting the color value, another thing that you want to think about is really about our paint and water ratio. Because knowing how to adjust your color values, like in this case, where you have got a whole range, it also means you need to know how to adjust how much water you have in your brush, because here the diluted side has a lot more water, and it does not mean that your brush needs to be wet. So you need to pay attention to that. Now I'm loving how the direction of this painting has taken shape, because you know the before was a different look, and now with that orange and that bridge of transition of color, just for me to bring it up to you, you can see just that simple thing where I had added in or glazed in permanent rose in here, which was essentially purple before. It changed the color. I had added in blue, so there's the transition. And then over here, it has gone over to create some of these blends. So you can see that red going into the orange and then the yellow. So there is so much harmony going on. And then earlier on here also, where I had added in that additional thing. You can create spaciousness when you have marks that are far away, but you also want your marks that are far away to be small, because the size actually matters. So this is really rules of composition, and we recently were going through this with Brush Movement Collective. We've been working a lot on our composition skills. We're also learning a little bit about how exactly to put a painting together while thinking about the hierarchy of effects. So you can see that we are really nerding out about our composition per se. So you can see I put one here, and now I'm going to go diagonal, and this one was in this direction. I'm just going to change up the direction, and I'm just going to do it this way instead. So I'm just going to add in a little bit of pink here. You know, I just dab and it's going to disperse. And what happens is that it will just allow the viewer to kind of like imagine. And you see the fun thing about dabbing over here, and the leaf is essentially still, it's fully dry. So it blends out and you get this beautiful glaze of color over, and you just let the paint do its thing, right? Okay. I'm gonna create this center to be a little bit darker. So I hope that you are enjoying this series where I just show you within 10 minutes or so some little things that you can do or think about when you are working with your painting. It is basically just to teach you to overwork less and to think more about what you already know, so that way you become a lot more intentional as a painter. My paint and water ratio here was so wet, and I decided to lift it out and dry it out a little bit more because I want it to be nice and thick. It's the center of the flower, and your center of the flower should be nice and thick. But here is what's going on. I have to show you. My palette is an absolute puddle. And this is not good, friends. Because if it's a puddle like this, every time you go back into your palette and you put paint onto your paper, you are 100% going to bring water in. And when you bring water in on times where you don't want water, then you're going to struggle. And then everything's going to be wet, and it's going to be muddy, and it's going to be messy. So what do I do right now from here? So this is live troubleshooting. I would then try and get the thickest consistency I can get. You know, I could take my paper towel and dab it all off. I could do that, but I'm not going to do that. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mix my color right now. So I have got I was going to put in a dark blue here. And you know, funny enough, I ran out of blue because I've been playing so much with blue. And what I have is a purple instead. So I'm going to just pull out this purple and I'm going to stick it here in my palette and let all the colors lean down so that this is going to be nice and thick. And with my purple, I'm going to pull out a little bit of green. So basically I'm trying to get an in-between color, but I'm never going to be able to get my blue for sure. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just get a nice thick consistency of purple, and I'm going to get a nice thick consistency of yellow also. And as you can see, the moment I had purple on my brush, touched a bit of yellow, it turned brown. And that's because we neutralized it. And I'm trying to neutralize my purple a little so it's not so bright. You get a little bit of a mauve kind of purple. And I'm going to, now I've got a nice thick consistency. I know that it's not wet. And I'm just going to put it down here. So that's a lot thicker, it's a lot better. That's what I want, I prefer, at least, okay? And I'm gonna just make sure that I've got nice thick consistencies of paint here because I don't want my center to end up looking like a big blob. We're gonna come back to it and definitely troubleshoot it a little bit more, but I hope that this has given you some insight on how you can use color to brighten and modify your painting a bit more. And this was done after my painting has fully dried. Thank you so much for joining me. By now, you have seen how exactly I have used color to adjust my painting. We're just at the second layer of the painting. And for those of you who set aside to paint and finish a painting in one go, maybe this feels a little bit like there is too much of a gap in between. I often find that the gaps that you give yourself between each painting allows you to think and start to see the steps and the skills that are required as you move on. A couple of weeks ago, I did a video where I talked you through how to actually apply your skills, and this is exactly why we are not rushing through the whole process, and I want to take each piece at a time to show you the magic of putting things together, while addressing that question that so many of my brush movement members are asking around overworking. Once you become more intentional with the way you paint and reflect on the techniques and things that are required when you put your paint on paper, you will realize that this is not about painting one flower, but any flower. So start reflecting on all of those tutorials that you have been watching. Ask yourself what exactly are the skills that are underlying behind all the different things that you're watching on your screen. This way, you're going to learn how to adapt instead of copy, which can be so helpful for your practice. Now, I'm really excited for us to do the third series because after covering brushes, color, the next thing I want to do is layers and contrast. If you're ready, I'll see you again in the next episode.